Hi, my name is Jessica Tilton. For those of you who may not know me, I am your 2023 Miss Illinois, and last year I applied to be a living kidney donor for my dad. This month is National Donate Life Month, and today we're celebrating living donors, so I wanted to share my story of what it was like going through the living donor process. It all started with background research that I did because I was in my early 20s when I first applied, and I wanted to make sure this was going to be safe for me. And if you've gone to any of my seminars, you've seen that I've talked about a 20-year study from the Mayo Clinic, and it has shown that living donation is safe at any age, that they have been able to observe, I should say, in the study, but they wouldn't take a risk on someone they didn't feel would have a great outcome. In that study I mentioned, there were over 3,000 individuals, and they tracked them over 20 years. And during this time, they only had 2 deaths. One was to homicide and another to suicide, I believe. There were no complications or chronic issues from the actual transplant surgery. All these individuals were still incredibly healthy 20 years later. And they did not anticipate any problems either. It was phenomenal. How many surgeries can say they have a success rate like that? So for me, that was the lock that said, okay, yeah, I'm good. Like, I'm excited to do this. And the first step after I felt secure in my decision, and I did obviously a ton more research being in the science field myself, I went online to the Mayo Clinic and I filled out an application. And this questionnaire, I like to think of it as when you're applying for a job, they want to have the best person for that job. They don't want to take a risk or invest their time, energy, money into someone they don't think is going to be a great fit. They're going to, have issues with later on. It's the same thing with being a living organ donor. So this questionnaire asked pretty much everything about me, my past surgeries, how I was doing, like overall anxiety, my just general well-being. I mean, every single question from A to Z was on there. I remember at one point there was actually a map of a person's body, and I think you could click on it and then say, yes, I've had a surgery here, and it would list the surgeries. And I don't want anyone to kind of back away from this and be like, oh, well, I've had a bunch of surgeries. They are not even going to accept me. Well, I've had a lot of surgeries, especially at a young age. I had 5 different surgeries for my, I'd say from kind of my abdomen down to my knee. I've had 5 different ones from an accident I was in. And actually the first time I applied to be a living donor for my dad, I filled out the entire questionnaire and I had my surgeries on there. They emailed me back and said, no, sorry, like, what is wrong with you? Why did you need an internal fixator? Do you have brittle bones? And then I emailed back to I believe it was a nurse practitioner, and I explained like what the surgeries were, because I tried to explain it on the little paragraph they gave us, but saying I was in an accident with a bunch of broken bones, they've all healed, I'm doing fine now, and I'm out of physical therapy, that was hard to convey in a tiny little paragraph. So once I was able to talk to the nurse practitioner and call her on the phone, she's like, oh yeah, reapply. So unfortunately I had to re-put everything in again. So that's something to note. Just make sure you're very descriptive. But I put in everything again, and they looked it over and said, yeah, you're great. You can move on to the next round. They thought I was healthy enough to be a candidate to go forward. At this point, some people are excluded due to various conditions. Maybe you have, a heart condition where you yourself are going to end up needing a transplant or really serious surgery down the line. They don't want to take any chance on you. And you can have this and feel safe about applying, even if, you're like, well, I don't know, are they gonna, am I gonna have a disease down the line? Maybe am I genetically at risk for something else? They test for this. They look at all these factors and they take this into account. And this is how people get past the different stages. And you also have to remember, you have the right to say, no, this is a little much for me at any point in time. So being a living donor and going through this process it's safe, it's secure, and I want you to feel comfortable in it. So once I got through that and they said, yeah, you look like a great candidate to move forward, they scheduled a blood test. And I don't quite remember what they all looked for in this blood test. I don't remember if they were typing me or not to see if I was a match for my dad. I think that might have been it, the first one. And I am an exact match for my dad. We have the same blood type, so we are related, even though he might joke about it and say we're not. But there were also, I think they ran a complete blood panel there. So they're going to look at your sodium, your potassium, your, calcium, your bicarb. They're just going to make sure that all of your normal levels are okay. and I passed that, so I got to go up to the Mayo Clinic. They called and they said, okay, you're gonna need to come up here for, I think it was 3 days of appointments I had up in the Mayo Clinic. And so again, after they even checked my blood, they, made sure to talk to me and say, okay, are you still doing okay? Everything okay? Any questions? They were very, very efficient with everything. If I had a question, they answered me that same day. You have your own patient care team as well. I forgot to mention that. So my dad had his patient care team at the Mayo Clinic, and then I had a separate one. So all of my doctors, all of my nurses were completely different from my dad's, and they do this so there is no bias in the decision. They don't want a doctor who is advocating for my dad to also advocate for me. That would, be a little unethical to say, well, we just want her kidney because, our patient needs it. So they are separate the entire time, which is amazing. And actually, after I finished those blood tests, before I went to the Mayo Clinic, I had a psychologist or a psychiatrist, I don't remember who exactly it was, but they called me and they had a consultation over the phone to check my mental status, my well-being, how I was feeling. And it is normal to feel kind of nervous about this, to say, hey, I've never done this before. It's brand new. That's human nature. And that's why I'm talking about it today. And I said, I've had many surgeries before. I'm comfortable with the surgery. Anesthesia is something that has always freaked me out. I don't know why. I'm comfortable with the surgery itself, but that's the only thing I'm kind of nervous about at this point. So when we went forward and went through, going to the Mayo Clinic, I felt great. I was excited to learn more about this process and be immersed in it. And when I got to the Mayo Clinic, I realized the campus was huge. I mean, people talk about it, and I have a couple friends actually who work at the campus up in Rochester, but it was huge and it was so efficient as well. When I'd walk in, they would do my test and I was in and out within, maybe 15 minutes, and I would get the results back on the app on my phone in maybe another 5. It was crazy, but I had a full body workup within, maybe 15 minutes, and I would get the results back on the app on my phone in maybe another 5. It was crazy, but I had a full body workup. I had an EKG done, so they look at my heart. I believe, I had an MRI with contrast, so that allows you to see all the blood flow, and I actually was able to capture the visualizations or the videos they were able to record of my kidneys. So that was really cool to be able to actually see this 3D model of everything. And they did, what else? They did about everything they could. I had various urine tests that could be done, and I had a 24-hour urine test where I carried around a big jug of what was my urine, and I peed in it for 24 hours. So that was probably the only part that I would say was not fun, because I was pretty tired, and carrying around about 2 liters of urine wasn't fun. But besides that, it was pretty straightforward. I did have a lot of vials of blood taken out. I had 19, and I was freaked about that. When I was in my accident, I did lose a lot of blood, and so I knew I'd be okay, but that's one thing that has freaked me out. I don't know why. I know I'll be fine. I know I'll survive it. One thing that really comforted me, though, is the nurse who was taking out my blood. She told me, I believe it was either 94, 97, 90 something. She said, when you donate blood, they actually take out like 94, 97 vials of the same size she was taking out of me. And she was only doing 19. So she's like, you'll be fine. You're just a little nervous. And I was like, yeah, I am. And we spent 3 days going through various doctor's appointments as well. So there I also met with another psychiatrist, and this was a psychiatry resident. He was I don't remember how many years postgraduate he was, but he was a very nice man. And, he asked me, why are you doing this? Why do you want to do this? And I said, it's my dad. Like, I want to help him. I always had this feeling growing up, ever since I was little. I'm going to get emotional about this. I always had this feeling growing up that I was going to donate my kidney to my dad. And I've had this ever since I knew that he would eventually need a transplant. And it wasn't anything that, I really told everyone. I actually don't think my dad knew I was going to donate to him or wanted to donate to him until the time came that we were looking for living donors. And I said I would. It was a no-brainer to me. So I still get emotional talking about that. But he could see that I was doing it for the right reasons. My dad wasn't pressuring me. He wasn't paying me to do it. They really want to make sure that you are making this decision because you truly want to be a living donor and not because someone's telling you to or you feel like you owe someone something. In the United States, it's actually illegal to buy or bribe someone for an organ. So if you ever see any post about, looking for an organ donor, $10,000 cash, that's very illegal because you're not doing it for the right reason. And we don't want that in this country. We don't want to build that stigma or stereotype around organ donors that they're only doing it for money, because the ethics behind that, the motivation, people could, hide things about their health in a questionnaire. You want to be as outwardly, honest and truthful as you can, so the doctors and surgeons and nurses, everyone in your care team is able to make the best decision. So the psychiatrist at the end, and I was really worried after that appointment, I was like, oh my gosh, maybe he's not going to do it because he thinks I'm too emotional, or he thinks that maybe I'm just not thinking through this clearly. But at the end of the appointment, he said, you have my vote. I believe you're doing this for the right reasons, and I want you to help your dad. And that gets me. He didn't word it exactly like that. Don't come for me if the care team sees this. He was a wonderful, wonderful resident. And I remember I met with a social worker too over the course of these 3 days, and she talked about finances. And this is really ironic because I'm actually advocating next Tuesday, April 9th, and I'm talking with legislators about different tax credits that living donors can have. So we're currently advocating for a new tax credit that would give living donors up to $5,000 reimbursement for travel expenses, time off work, and any medications if they need any, Tylenol post-surgery, because when you have surgery, you're probably gonna be a little sore at the incision site. That's normal. That's expected with any procedure. So I'm hoping to have this move forward in I believe it's 119th Congress, but that's an aside. But anyway, my social worker, she talked about finances. She talked about what this would mean for me going forward, and what this would do for me. And after that, she said, yeah, you also have my blessing, and we'll move forward from here. And then towards the end of my 3-day excursion at the Mayo Clinic, I was able to see all the different scans of my body. I was able to talk with various physicians, and it was really just a complete health check. So I knew, what was wrong with me. And at 24, 25 years old, I learned I had high cholesterol. I went to the gym. My parents would argue I only went there and practiced for my talent, but I throw around a flag. If my dad's watching this, he's probably going to comment something about that, but that's okay. But, I went to the gym. I walked around campus a lot because I was teaching at Bradley University at that time. And for me, I was so shocked to find out that I had high cholesterol. And then I learned it was actually the lifestyle I was living. So because I was teaching at Bradley, I had the microwavable macaroni cups for lunch a lot of the time. I did have oatmeal, okay? I did have oatmeal sometimes. But I learned that that was my lifestyle, the choice I was living, and the choices I was living. And the chips I'd have in my office, while they were great, and especially in between classes or labs when I was setting something up, or, getting ready to go see my students, just because it was quick and easy, that was affecting me really young. So I've since been on top of that, and my cholesterol has improved, but that's just how complete this is. The full body scans actually told me that I had a gallstone, and I'm going to assume that was from my diet. But how thorough they are, if the palm of my hand, actually if my whole hand is going to represent my gallbladder, the gallstone that they found, let's see if I can find something, was as big as the tip of this pen. I mean, if you can imagine, the very, 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 very tip. That's how big the gallstone was. And I actually remember that it was so small that when I was with my my primary doctor on my care team, he was zooming in to the radiology pictures and saying, I actually don't know if I can find it. And then he kind of zoomed in on one corner. He said, maybe this is it, but that's how thorough they are at the Mayo Clinic. They give you an entire health evaluation. I had no issues with gallstones, never have in my life. I didn't know I had high cholesterol, but I was able to find this out regardless if I was able to match and be a living donor or not. So these tests are so thorough and so complete. My dad's friend, who actually applied to be a living donor for him before I did, he went through all the testing, and then he actually found out he had chronic leukemia. He had no signs or symptoms, but they caught it in time to actually save his life. So because he applied to be a living donor for my dad, he saved his own life. And I believe he's doing great now because of this. That's how thorough they are. I can't stress that enough. I know I've said it 8 times, but I just really want to stress to you that they are not going to take a chance on you if they think there is anything that could go wrong in the future. You know, I know someone else who applied to be a living donor for my dad. They went through the entire thing and found out they had one tiny kidney stone. Like a very, very, very small kidney stone. Nothing else wrong with them. Had normal cholesterol. And that discredited them from being a living donor. Because if you have one kidney stone, you might have issues with more in the future, even though they're perfectly healthy now. And it might have just been a fluke due to an increase in something in their diet, the supplement they were taking. And then, you know, that helped them revamp how they were doing these various supplements that they were adding into their diet. So I really just want to stress that if you're considering being a living donor, it's safe. It is incredibly safe. And Dr. Tanner, the one I mentioned earlier, he explained it best to me as me in my early 20s. He would say that, you know, I would be perfectly fine for the rest of my life by having one kidney. I wouldn't need to be on any medications, any special diet, or anything. He said, as we age, our kidney function naturally declines. So when I get into, you know, my late 80s, my early 90s, my kidney function might be, instead of, you know, at the like 40%, what you would really anticipate for someone of that age group, which is normal, a normal decline. And if it's not 40, it's pretty close to it. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head. Mine would be, you know, maybe in the 30s instead. And it would just be a little bit lower than normal. But I'm not going to have any signs or symptoms. I'm not going to need a kidney transplant when I'm in my 90s. You know, I'll be okay. And if you protect your kidney function now, you know, when I am this young, so I always try to drink a ton of water. I have a low salt diet that I live by at this point. And I try to live a very kidney friendly lifestyle because I know eventually I'll apply again to be a living donor. And it'll likely be for my sisters. Hopefully my dad's kidney is a match and it's not rejected and he's able to live the rest of his life with it. But I was actually accepted to be a living donor for my dad. But we got the call. So I finished the testing to be a living donor. I believe it was a Thursday. It was Thursday. That next Friday. So my dad was registered in 2 different hospitals. To be on the waiting list for a kidney, one at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester and one in Barnes in St. Louis. And he got the call that very next day after I finished my testing from Barnes that they had a kidney for him. So it was so emotional. I remember it at 4 a.m. and that was the best moment of my life. And he went to get the kidney transplant. It was successful. The day my dad came home, I remember I was in the lab with my research students. I got the call from Mayo Clinic saying, you know, congratulations, we heard your dad got a kidney, that's amazing. I was like, yeah, thank you. And then they said, we also wanted to call and say that you would have been his match. And that was the coolest feeling that I had, to know that I would have been able to make a difference and give someone the gift of life while I'm still here. So I encourage you, if this is something you've considered, even if you don't know someone that needs a kidney or liver, there's actually a representative in Illinois, Representative Nabila. I'm blanking on her last name. She's represented by Chicago. I actually posted about her. I got to meet her this past summer at a Gift of Life golf outing where she was honored and I was also honored as different community advocates for Gift of Hope and organ donation. But her story is so touching to me because she was on Twitter one day in the middle of, I believe when she was getting her graduate degree, she was just on Twitter and she saw a tweet of a man that was looking for anyone who wanted to apply and be, you know, a living liver donor for him because he needed a new liver. And she goes, yeah, why not? She didn't know him at all, but she applied and she went through the process, very similar to kidney donation, the whole process with, the full body evaluation and everything. And she was his match. And she donated her liver, part of her liver, to him in her early 20s. And so the neat thing with living liver donation is you can donate just part of your liver and it'll actually grow back, which is so cool. With kidneys, it's different. You don't grow back a whole kidney, unfortunately. You just have one for the rest of your life. But she was able to donate part of her liver to someone she had never met, and it saved his life. Another great thing about living donation is, let's say, I donate my kidney to someone, and I donate to my dad or my sister or whoever, and let's say something weird happens. I contract this rare disease that no one, saw coming. I eat, some really bad whatever, and I'm just not great. I end up needing a organ transplant. Well, I'm bumped up to the top of the list. I don't have that decade wait on the list like everyone else does because I was already an organ donor. And they prioritize that. They say, you know what, you gave the gift of life to someone. Someone is still living because of you. So now we're going to give it back to you. And I think that's really neat that they do that. So if you ever need an organ someday and you're worried about, what if I do? You have the best outcome of anyone. Even if, you were just destined to always have that disease, no matter what, you have a better outcome now than you ever would have. So that's a really cool thing. And I know that someday I'm going to go back through this and be a living donor. But I encourage you today, if you're wanting to be a living donor, apply. If you don't know anyone, you can apply online to be a living donor, even if you don't know anyone. And there's something called a paired donation. So that's when you say, hey, I want to be a living donor for Jess's dad. And I apply to, be that person's living donor. There's also, I believe it's called non-paired, but there's one where you can say, hey, I know I want to be a living donor. I don't know who, but I just want to be a donor. I want to give someone the gift of life. And you can do that and say, I want to remain anonymous. I don't want to know how it goes. I just want to know that I gave the gift of life to someone while I was still here. Or, you can say, I don't want to be anonymous. I want to meet them. I want to say hi. I want to shake their hand after. I want to see who I gave life to. And they'll find someone to match it with you. And there's also the case of, which does happen a lot. So let's say, I was the donor for my dad, but it turns out we didn't have the right blood type, or maybe I had antibodies to something that he didn't, and it wasn't going to work, but I was still a great candidate to be a living donor. They can do something where they'll find someone else who would match with me. I will donate my kidney to this person, and my dad will also get another living donor. So it's a really cool thing because you're kind of saving two lives at once. But I'm excited I was able to share my story of what it was like to go through the process of being a living donor. It does get really tiring during those 3 days at the Mayo Clinic, but it's very rewarding to know that, one, you're potentially saving someone's life, and also you're probably saving your own life by finding out, the quirks of your body, or, something that's maybe not going right that you didn't know about, or maybe everything you're doing is great. So for me, that was finding out that the diet and lifestyle I was living in my early 20s was giving me high cholesterol. And, maybe that could predispose me to having a heart attack at a young age, or who knows what else. So I'm really glad I did it. And I'm so thankful my dad was able to get a kidney from someone. And I'm really hopeful that eventually we'll be able to meet their family. But for now, I encourage you, if you're not already an organ donor, not a living donor, but a regular organ donor, saying when I pass away, I want to donate my organs to someone, I encourage you to do that by going to registerme.org and signing up. It only takes the information, I believe it's on your driver's license. It takes 30 seconds to register, and you get to save up to 8 lives someday. And that's so cool. My aunt actually was able to meet her donor family when we were down in Florida for the Miss America competition. So that was my favorite thing that actually came out of Miss America, was knowing that my aunt was able to meet this family and they were able to see who their significant person in their life that had passed away and left their legacy behind. I don't want to give any details about, the donor's family, but they were able to see that my aunt is here today because of the decision of this organ donor. So thank you for listening, and I hope I've encouraged you to either read more or pursue being a living organ donor, because it's a great thing to do, and you're going to leave your legacy here. While you're here, you'll be able to see someone live out their dreams, and it's the best gift you can give, the gift of life.